Another issue of concern became intersectionality, a phrase or a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, and you'll learn more about that in a TED Talk video that I've posted in this week's module. So intersectionality basically means that we need to contextualize the different identities of a woman or of a person, issues that affect women. So in order to fully understand the diverse needs of women, we can't assume that our own experience is every woman's experience. We need to look at how different parts of one's identity, sexuality, class, gender, which is different than sex, nationality, how all those things, their abilities, physical disabilities or abilities, how all these things bring about different needs for women. So intersectionality became very important for third wave feminists. Environmental justice. Earth Day started during second wave feminism, and so environmental justice really took off for third wave feminists. There were such things as ecofeminists who looked at how the way humanity has treated the earth is very similar to the way patriarchy has treated women. They looked at language similarities, such as how the earth is given a female gender. We talk about Mother Earth, Mother Nature. We talk about the land's fertility. We talk about raping the earth. So all of these language terms show that ecofeminists wanted to make the parallel that humanity has really exploited the earth the same way that patriarchy has exploited women. I would say that ecofeminism today is not as relevant as it used to be because now we just have general environmental justice. But still, it was a very interesting point of view to take that was eye-opening. So here's the response to the backlash and the rise of third wave, how third wave feminism really took on the backlash of the 80s. There were more publications. Magazines such as Bitch, Bust, Off Our Backs went into publication. So it wasn't just Ms. Magazine that had started in the 70s. Now we had more publications, and Eve Ensler published the Vagina Monologues. The Vagina Monologues is a great, quick read about all kinds of stories having to do with vaginas. And they're just short vignettes. And it was the first time that anyone kind of explicitly put it out there and said, let's talk about our vaginas, right? All kinds of stories. Very, very good read. She also co-founded V-Day. V-Day, I'll talk a little bit about it in a minute, but basically it became an international movement to raise awareness on violence against women and girls. I'd have to say that Rebecca Walker, daughter of famous author Alice Walker, who wrote The Color Purple, Rebecca Walker published a short essay in Ms. Magazine called Becoming Third Wave. And that's really what started this movement that then became referred to as third wave feminism. She wrote this article called Becoming Third Wave, which you're going to read in this week's module, as a response to the Anita Hill hearings. She also published a book called To Be Real, Telling the Truth and Changing the Face of Feminism, in which she argued that people don't have to identify as feminists, that most people don't want to take on a label, but instead, in our actions, we can have feminist actions, small and large actions. Those either move us toward justice or away from it. Anyway, in her response to the Anita Hill hearings, you'll read it for yourself, but basically the Anita Hill hearings were when Clarence Thomas was nominated for as a Supreme Court justice, which is a lifetime appointment, as you know, for the Supreme Court. And this is a huge honor and a very enormous, a mammoth responsibility, because we have three branches of government, right? And the Supreme Court is one branch of the government, and we have checks and balances. So when someone is nominated as a Supreme Court justice, everything in their background is closely examined with a fine-tooth comb to see if there is anything at all that would make this candidate less than 100% ethical and qualified to make laws and even, amend our Constitution. So they're put through this grueling process, and everyone in there who has ever known them is welcome to testify how they know this person. So Anita Hill came forth and talked about how he had sexually harassed her years earlier when she worked for him. And the interesting part of this testimonial is that when she testified, then the interrogation turned on her, and she was the one that was being scrutinized. Her testimony went on for over 3 months, if you can believe that. She was grilled, and it was the first time that this was on national television, right, on C-SPAN. It was all anyone talked about, and it was her credibility that was questioned. And every detail about how she had been harassed was, household conversation. So women were outraged at how Anita Hill was treated and the kinds of things she was told and asked. So Rebecca Walker wrote this short essay, Becoming Third Wave, and it served kind of as a battle cry for feminists to pay attention, that the fight is still real. And this was, I believe, in 1991. So that's why they're called third wave feminists, because of Rebecca Walker's essay. Naomi Wolf wrote a book, I believe it was her PhD dissertation, called The Beauty Myth. She started questioning the beauty myth, saying that, we need to question this beauty ideal that we have. It's not universal, that lighter skin, slender, curvy, youthful appearance that we now seem to be more obsessed with than ever. That beauty that it's universal is a myth. That each culture has slight variations or great variations in what is considered beautiful. But why do we keep selling the image that it's light skin, slender, curvy, long legs, right? Tall, big round eyes, plump lips, right? And that the cosmetic industry, and now I would say cosmetic surgery, that they keep selling us this idea that to be beautiful, you must look this one particular way, which is very Eurocentric, and that it's almost impossible to fit the beauty ideal for most women. So that was a fascinating essay that got people talking. And again, Jean Kilbourne came out with Killing Us Softly, Part 2. Another response to the backlash was that there were more grassroots, global, and local organizing. So there was more talk about sexual harassment, thanks to Rebecca Walker. There were high school and college women addressing rape, assault, and what's called everyday harassment. Just, walking down the street, being, facing catcalls and whistling, verbal assault by men. They also, I mentioned Bring Back the Night, Take Back the Night, they brought it back. I'm sorry. They brought back Take Back the Night and moved towards sex positivity. Code Pink was a women-led grassroots organization working to end U.S. wars and militarism. They supported peace and human rights initiatives. They wanted to redirect our tax dollars into things that women had been fighting for all along, such as healthcare, education, more green jobs, and life-affirming programs. Instead of having this military industrial complex that we have in the United States, this ginormous military spending that we have because we keep putting troops in different parts of the world. So Code Pink was a direct response to the US being in Iraq. V-Day, like I said, was started by Eve Ensler. It's the global movement to end violence against women and girls. It's grown every year. It's a huge movement now internationally. Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality. And in the northwestern United States, Washington, Oregon, California, especially Northern California, the punk rock scene brought on the Riot Girl movement because these girl bands just took the punk rock scene by storm. And they brought to the conversation how the punk rock scene was very sexist, very, very male dominated, and really didn't have a space for female bands. So they created their own movement, had their own concerts, and it was pretty phenomenal. So more accomplishments of third wave feminism, I would say that this, looking at same-sex marriage, Prop 8 in San Francisco by Gavin Newsom, for a short period, allowed same-sex marriage. And even though it was overturned, the accomplishment itself was that it set the stage for eventually allowing same-sex marriage at the federal level, because by San Francisco starting with Prop 8, it got everyone talking, and it showed that there had been a cultural shift, that the population's perspectives on same-sex marriage had really opened up, and people were ready for it and celebrated it. And so I think what started in the early 2000s by Gavin Newsom really forced people to determine that, it's time to give same-sex couples all the same legal and social rights that straight couples have. Because there were over 1,000 different rights that same-sex couples, when they were only considered domestic partners, they did not share. They had to be legally married in order to have the full rights as same-sex couples. So that was a huge accomplishment. The Women's Conference in Beijing became an annual women's conference, but the first big one was in Beijing. Later there was one in Mexico City. So it became an international attention to, let's have a women's conference and talk about what the issues are on an international scale. Feminism in the 90s really became popularized, whereas before, being called a feminist, you never knew how someone would take that. A lot of people were for it, but they would say, well, I'm not a feminist, but, and then they'd go on to say how they supported all these social justice, things that feminists were for. But people felt strange about the word. And the reason people felt strange about calling themselves feminists is because of the backlash. The backlash made people feel that feminism is too extreme. But artists like the Spice Girls, who are talking about girl power, they really kind of mainstreamed this women's power, girl power movement.